Welcome, everyone. We're going to start our meeting today. This is an open house for the NewSpace course. We're going to talk a little bit about the course, but also talk about the struggles and the challenges to do business within the space industry, the new space industry most specifically. And to help with this discussion, we've got our experts for this class, which is Mike Daly. Mike Daly, welcome.
Hello, Michael. Hello, everybody.
I'm really happy that you're here. And also we have Ken Allman. Ken, welcome.
Good day to everybody.
Great. So as we go forward, we will ask you some questions, but we're primarily at this point going to stay informational in this approach. The idea of an online class for new space industry is the brainchild of Mike Daly. And Mike, I'm really going to turn to you at this point and say, why is this class necessary?
Well, we designed and built this class for a lot of reasons, Michael. Space really is the entrepreneurial frontier now. We really want the folks that are tuning into this course to be successful in doing business in space. And we want them to understand their role and benefit from the space economy, more or less saying to them, embracing space and finding their place in space. NASA is no longer the single space business as it traditionally has been. And so we want them to kind of answer a couple of questions. How do I, with a great idea, participate in the space industry? Or if they're working with a space company, how do I grow my company or grow within the company I'm in within the space industry?
That's great. And Mike, I think one of the things that you mentioned to me when we first talked about this class and the formation of the class was that if someone has a great idea or has a business that may have a market in the new space industry, something that's not terrestrial, that is doing business with the space industry, where do they turn? How do they identify who are the decision makers? How do they reach out to sectors of the new space industry? And Ken, I would love for you to talk a little bit about that. Why do you think a course of this level is valuable to people who are interested or an entrepreneur who would like to do business in space?
Well, most entrepreneurs are trying to find their foothold. They got a good product, or they believe they have a good product, they have a good service. And they kind of understand their customer base. The question then lies with, do they truly understand in the new space industry how big that customer base really is? So we look at we divided up the business ecosystem into sectors, and you may not the course will help you work within your sector and pretty much integrate into other sectors that can use your product or service.
Excellent, Ken. That's fantastic. So that gives a good background of all of that. And Mike, would you talk a little bit about that breadth of geopolitical power in the space industry, in the new space industry specifically?
Sure, Michael. And without getting into too much detail now, Ken was a great introduction into this, that this is a business ecosystem, but this business ecosystem very much operates on a global scale and impacts every aspect of an individual's life, whether they know that or not. So taking the traditional look at geopolitical power, space can be found in diplomatic functions today. It can be found in the information world, most certainly, whether you're talking about cell phones or financial transactions. It's increasingly important. Well, it has been important in the military industry because of satellites, but it's going to have an increasingly big footprint in the military environment. And economically, as I alluded to with the information aspect, but economically, new vistas, again, going back to Ken's comment on the business ecosystem, the space business ecosystem, economically, we're going to find it impacting virtually every industry. It'll either impact them here on this planet, or their version of it will make a move into space, whether it's transportation or resources or energy or whatever.
Excellent. And we have some questions, but I'm going to leave those for later. We'll talk about those later. We do have other questions which are about the topics that we're talking about. And many people are talking about what is an engagement plan for a new space sector. Ken, I'm wondering if you would chat just a little bit about, again, those stakeholders, but also how they're organized, how it seems daunting, frankly, Ken, to for a small business or even a large business, frankly, to think about doing business in the new space industry. It seems like it's pie in the sky, so to speak. It seems like it's out there and you can't touch it. Can you help people understand a little bit more about how it's organized and how we can conceptualize all this to do business?
Sure. From a little on my background, I come from the project and program management side of the house, whereas Mike is the communication side of the house. And we on the program management side, and those listening to this will understand, who your stakeholders are and kind of how to engage with that group that you know of. But we take this a little bit beyond and take it from the stakeholders, and then we look at the industry sector that you're working with, and you look at the sectors almost as a stakeholder unto itself also. And then, as I mentioned before, we have 17 different industry sectors that build up the ecosystem. So we take each one of those, and then we, as the graphic here shows, we kind of build upon that. And with that, if you can harness those three levels, then you actually have impact into the whole ecosystem, which is that kind of outer ring. And you can reach more people, you can reach more stakeholders, and you have a better handle on how to engage, which is the most important part, how to engage with all of those stakeholders at each different level. And with that, it really gives you some power to move your company forward and even expand into horizons you didn't even believe you could get into before.
Excellent. So if I understand you correctly, the stakeholder may be an individual or a group of individuals, but it's also the sector itself. Is that what you're saying?
You can look at it that way, yes, because you're going to engage with a sector, and you're going to engage on individual levels. And this is where, both from the comm side and the PM side, you really work into that communication plan and how do you talk and how do you engage with those folks. Because it's not always you're not going to send an email to a sector with an email that says, hey, launch sector XYZ, but you are going to engage with that group and those that are working within that group.
Excellent. So the NewSpace class has been organized essentially into 3 different modules. And again, this is under the guidance of both Mike and Ken. The first module is really about understanding what those NewSpace ecosystem is all about and what the NewSpace sectors are all about. Not only identifying individuals, but also learning to speak the language of an individual space sector. And we'll take a look at those space sectors in a little bit. And then after understanding the language of some of those space sectors, then figuring out for your entrepreneurial work, which space sector is the most appropriate space sector to do an engagement with. And that's the beginning of that engagement plan. So that's the second module, is really identifying the value of a space sector and also understanding your connection to, or your business's connection to, that space sector. Once that's done, then Mike and Ken both have come up with this formula for creating an engagement plan for that space sector. And in the online course, what we do is walk through each step of creating that engagement plan. And then we share those engagement plans in a discussion in a web meeting, just like this one. So the online class is really meant to be very interactive, not only with the instructors, Mike Daly and Ken, but also with the other participants in the class. Mike, would you share just a little bit about the objectives of the class in terms of what people, the value of the class, what people will be able to take away from the class?
Sure, Michael. And Ken and I put a lot of thought into this as what in our world, the deliverables were, what we wanted the participant to take away from it. So we have identified four course objectives, which are up on the screen there for you, of improving your understanding of the ecosystem, and then understanding your business sector, as Michael talked to, and Ken also. Then how they can, who needs to be engaged and how best to engage them, and then completing an actual engagement plan that is functional and will work for you. Again, the overall objective here is designed to help you understand the NewSpace stakeholder environment and how best to conduct group and individual stakeholder engagement.
Excellent. And so ultimately, going through the class, you will come out with an actual tangible product, frankly, and that is that stakeholder engagement plan that not only has been put together in a very thoughtful pattern, but also has been reviewed not only by the instructors of the class, but also with other individuals in the class. And Mike, I'm sure that you have ways to deal with people who don't want to be as public with their engagement plan. So for example, if I have something that I really don't want to share with others, but I want to get your feedback, is that possible in the class?
It is. It is. We've designed the course so that Ken and I can deal with individuals and individual organizations to respect proprietary concerns that they might have. Ken and I both come from a background of doing many, many years of work with these kinds of companies and understand the various methods we can use to protect any information they want to share, but also provide them with whatever guidance might be helpful to make their plan a success. So we have a plan both from an academic side, if you want to share your plan and get the input of others, or if you want to be a little bit more private and share it just with Ken and I and initiate all the necessary protocols and protections to make sure that information doesn't go anywhere. But it still gives you the access to an additional source of advice and consulting.
Excellent. So in the online class, and of course, I'm part of the team, I'm an educator. So what I do is I translate some of the vast information and knowledge of Mike and Ken into activities that will help people understand the process, but also understand the skills that they need to become competent to reach out to stakeholders in the NewSpace industry, whether it be transportation or finance or habitats or communications or industry or mining or all of the 17 sectors that Ken has talked about, and have the confidence really to speak their language and also be able to present a professional engagement plan to begin to work in that industry. So Mike, I wonder if I could turn back to you to talk a little bit more about that authentic stakeholder engagement. How can you go through some of these points related to building that engagement?
Well, sure, Michael. And the reason that we're giving this at this point, not trying to make this too much of a digging into what the course is at or what it's about. The reason Ken and I wanted to include this part is to let folks know that we're talking about authentic stakeholder engagement. Now, authentic stakeholder engagement is not a list of names on a spreadsheet. It's a two-way two-way communication, and it's a understanding in detail of the channels that a stakeholder uses to communicate. But in order to have this authentic stakeholder engagement, there's 7 definitely need to haves that Ken and I have identified that empower this engagement, this authentic engagement, and make it work quite candidly. So, and you can see them listed here. I won't read them to everybody, but it talks about character and a commitment by the entire organization, and that it's data driven. This is not something, as I was jokingly saying earlier, you just list names on a spreadsheet and hope somebody gets called. It brings in everybody involved internally and externally, which is why we talk about employees, and looks at stakeholders as partners, not just, gee, we're going to talk to them one time and we've done our part with stakeholder engagement. And it's a commitment to the long term. Now, these are very much things that Ken and I deal with as we're helping people establish stakeholder processes. And it's something that we feel is important for one of the important takeaways of a course participant to understand these things, to either take back to their leadership, or in the case of leaders that might be taking the course, to understand in order to be successful with a stakeholder engagement process.
Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and skip this that slide, but we do want to let you know that one of the other elements that we have included in the course is what we call a private NewSpace Enterprise magazine. One of the problems with the information that's coming out of the NewSpace industry is that it's changing so rapidly, and it has to be evaluated on a fairly rapid scale as well. So in the course, we invite all of the participants to share articles that they've found in their particular sector, to share them with the group and get comments and begin a dialogue. And we use an application called Flipboard, which is really fairly handy on your phone or on an iPad. And when you post an article, you can tag it with one of those 17 sectors: transportation, information infrastructure, communication, microgravity, research, education, manufacturing, robotics, travel, security, habitats, mining, energy, maintenance, maintenance services, administration, environmental, industry, and healthcare and finance. And so each one of those sectors articles can be tagged with one or more of those sectors to encourage an informed discussion about those particular sectors. And in addition, we have an activity which I'm going to model for you right now. And the activity is to share an article with the group. And Mike and Ken, I don't think you knew what article I'm going to be sharing, but I'm going to go ahead and share this article from Tim Fairholtz. It's an article that was in the it was in the Quartz. It's a organization called Quartz, and the title of it is that SpaceX just saved NASA $500 million with one rocket. And one of the things I tagged this with the financial industry or the financial sector for NewSpace. And the story is basically this: that NASA was trying to send a probe to Jupiter, and they patched together an older rocket, and it turned out that they were not going to be able to use it for many years. They turned to SpaceX, and in a matter of a much shorter period of time, they came up with a solution that was the pocket cost, the cost for the SLS previously was $726 million, and the new rocket that was coming from SpaceX was was at a price tag of $178 million. So there is a savings of money. And one of the reasons I found this article incredibly interesting was that we hear a lot about billionaires who are doing business in space. But one of the important aspects, I believe, and I'm hoping to get some feedback from Mike and Ken, is that the entrepreneurial approach to NewSpace, frankly, will bring costs down and frankly make things happen quicker. And so we have previously thought of NASA doing all of this work, but getting creative minds to come together in a fashion that's very entrepreneurial ultimately can save money and may even make things more eco-friendly, frankly, is to look at solutions that are really part of our own culture today. So Mike and I think I've shared the value of the article. I've tagged it with the finance industry. It might be that we've got some other sectors that could be tagged there as well. Mike, do you want to comment on that article?
Well, it is an exceptional example of the finance aspect of the ecosystem. And to kind of enlarge on what you said, you're right. It's moved beyond the billionaire club as the costs of launch have gone down. That along with miniaturization, which is lightening things up as far as launch, weight, and robotics, things of that nature are all coming to a perfect convergence, and going to which is enabling the industry to go forward, which I think this article contributes to. It also explains to those that are in the business aspect of space or the financing aspect that are looking for reasons of, okay, what exactly is the return on investment in this company? This is a perfect example of showing a return of investment by going a less expensive route to make pathways into space a lot easier. So,
excellent. That's great. Ken, do you and of course I'm acting as a student here, and frankly, I learned a lot when I did this particular activity, which we asked other participants to do in the course. Do you have any comments about that article?
Well, if you look at and compare what's going on today, and this article is just one example relating to the space race from the 60s, and where things that were extremely expensive turned into commercial use, everyday use, and those folks that get wrapped up with, oh, it costs $500 million to launch a rocket. This shows it's not going to cost that. And it allows companies to forecast at some point they're going to be able to get into this industry. And when will it be cost effective for them to jump in and use some of these services as they watch the cost of using those services come down.
Excellent. That's fantastic. So let's go ahead and continue. And so we've talked a little bit about Module 1. We do the introduction to the ecosystems. We talk about the business sectors and try to figure out how to speak the language of those individual business sectors, and then identifying the participants' own business sector or perhaps the interest in a particular business sector. For example, I'm in education. I didn't even consider that education is actually a is a NewSpace sector. So I'm very interested in developing programs for that particular sector. And then also understanding the desire for business sector relationships and developing how that engagement will happen. And then discussing the challenges and opportunities that are available in each individual space sector. And those are done with others in the course. So as you may actually find others that are interested in the same space sector. So there's a networking component to being involved in this online course. So Mike, do you want to talk about the networking aspect to students going through or participants going through and then actually finding alliances with others who may be interested in the same space sector?
Well, sure. It's actually, in its own way, it's a stakeholder relationship kind of an engagement. You're finding individuals that are in your field or related to your field, or are pursuing different projects that you might not have even thought of before. And so it helps your innovation, your new concepts to help push your business forward. This happens because all of a sudden people are, instead of being in a very narrow area where they're perhaps developing a single piece of equipment, or they are in a single module, they're in a single launch kind of an industry somewhere this allows them to expand that horizon and understand, getting back to the original thought on this process, of the entire industry sector that they're in, and bigger than that, the entire business ecosystem that they're a part of, to help make that industry sector and that ecosystem much more influential in world affairs, and then much more influential in their own country. And it really expands, like that earlier slide showed, growing from that first bit of relationships that you're forming. So point being is that what they're learning here to do with others is the same kind of a mechanism they're going to use in working with people in their associated sectors, and perhaps in their own individual organizations, if people, multiples in their organization are part of this process.
Excellent. So we, in module 2, that's when we go through the planning components, and sort of in a safe space, just as Mike is talking about, you can practice engagement and practice using the language of a particular sector before working with actual people in the sector. And that goes in module 2. So those activities are all centered around developing that stakeholder engagement plan, but it's also being able to practice those skills. So I mentioned earlier that I'm in the education industry, but I have a little example here. Again, we have an activity for the participants to share the value of a particular space sector. And what was shocking to me is there is data related to the education in new space industries already, frankly, in the millions, the hundreds of millions. And so the opportunity there is a great opportunity there. And it was sort of shocking to me to be able to go to some data and find out that there really is a great new space industry for education at this very moment. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about the elements of the engagement plan? Again, we can't go into too much detail because that's in the course, but in a broader sense.
Well, yes, as we were mentioning, we've identified 10 components, 10 elements, whatever name you want to give them, that have to go into a successful engagement plan, a planning process, and the plan itself. And so in the course, we help the participants develop each of these elements, and starting with what is it we're trying to do, and then finishing with how do we measure it.
Excellent. And we also do encourage people to match up with mentors or coaches, and you may actually have someone who's interested in helping the new space industry expand, who will serve as a coach or a mentor, and they can be added to your network within the course as well. So then I'm going to go ahead and skip to the last module, which is to develop that engagement plan. And again, we're sort of practicing. This is really sort of figuring out how to put it all together. But really, it's a method of putting together facts and figures into a presentation, being able to discuss that presentation with others who are aligned with your space sector, and then present it in a meeting just like this one to get some feedback, not only from the other participants, but also from the facilitators of the course. Ken, I want to sort of throw back to you on this particular one and talk about the value of being able to put together a sort of a draft of an engagement plan and being able to get feedback from not only the participants, but the facilitators and teachers like yourself.
Yeah, sure. By having the engagement plan, this is the idea throughout the course is you're building your company's engagement plan. It isn't a faux plan. It's not an exercise, and then at the end of this, you go off and do your company's plan. The idea here is as you travel through the course, you put together something for you. And if you're not the decision maker, i.e. the owner of the company, you may have to get approval to to do this, because there will be costs associated with, engagement. Or you maybe go, if you are the owner, you're going out to investors. So you're going to have a product at the end of this that you can use and to take your company further down the engagement path. And even if you don't need money, it gives you a better idea of what it is your company needs to do to engage with your stakeholders, both in and outside of your current sector.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. And so this actually is sort of like a it's sort of like a little bit like a business plan. Is that correct? Would I be wrong in saying that, Ken?
Not at all. I keep referring to this sort of as how you would build a business plan. There's parts of that, and Mike talked about that. There's the 10 different segments of it, and how you develop each one of those is unique to each of those sections, or call them chapters in your plan, however you want to call it. But yeah, very, very similar to a business plan, and a lot of same elements, actually.
Excellent. So you see here in front of you how you log into the course, and there is and any online course, there are tools that are available within the course to help you move through and share your work with others, either with other participants or with the instructors of the class. And as we've been talking about over and over again, is that the NewSpace sector presentation, this is just a screenshot of the beginning of the presentation, and it's designed to lead you through each one of the space sectors with a discussion about each space sector. Because Mike and Ken, I'm going to turn to you, because these are dynamic space sectors. It may be that some of them coalesce and become one other space sector, or it might be that some break up, or it might be that they're defined in different ways over time. Mike, can you chat just a little bit about how those space sectors are formed and how they are in a dynamic mode?
Sure. Well, in the early days of the space industry, principally the 50s, 60s, the early years, basically space was pretty much just transportation. It was very simply a launch, and with some end in mind, either a domestic aspect to it, satellites or putting people on the moon, or a military aspect to it. But now in this new space world, there are a lot of sectors that are not only happening in space, which are things like manufacturing in space or energy, but those are also directly impacting their sister organizations down on the planet itself in energy or transportation or infrastructure. So what was easier to do and not keep this too narrowly defined, as in the early days of the space program, was to say what industries translate from Earth to space, both staying in space and working out there. Think space manufacturing, space welding, but how does that impact its sister organization, which originated on the planet of manufacturing and welding? And you see this now, you're starting to see this now in the discussions in the news with space tourism, and how what aspects of the tourism industry are going to translate from the planet as costs come down up into space itself. It's not just a matter of putting someone up there. How do you take care of them once they're up there? As Michael indicated earlier, there's a whole habitat discussion that goes far beyond anything that's been developed before. So that's what we mean, what Ken and I and Michael have tried to mean by dynamic. It's very much, if you can imagine, a flow of arrows up and down from the planet to what's going on out there to these various sectors, and growth in these sectors. Finance is growing. Healthcare is moving out of experimentation into actual solutions for issues on the planet. Obviously, environmental has always been there and is going to take on an even bigger piece as we go on with climate change.
Excellent. And Ken, I'd love to have you comment also on, we've been talking a lot about doing business in space and entrepreneurs, But there's also researchers and students, and frankly, people who are simply interested in promoting the idea of a new space industry, who may look at this and want to get involved in the process of actually defining some of what these stakeholder groups are.
Oh, most definitely. Um, and Mike and I are starting to work with some universities actually to help move some of their STEM projects or programs into an actual space related program. And with that comes a new breed of employee, a new breed of executive, and they're going to want to take businesses that aren't currently in the space industry and say, hey, we got a pretty good product or service, and we can do this in space. And we'll start seeing this. Mike mentioned with space tourism, as you know, and we talked earlier about getting costs down. We'll see who the first hotelier to build a space hotel is. We'll see if it's Marriott or if it's Hyatt, and they're going to take what they're doing here on Earth, and they're going to morph it. That's what good businesses do. They diversify and they find new places and new money.
That's great. It's sort of a whole new space race and a whole different perspective, having Marriott and Hyatt going against each other. That's fantastic. So we do have this is what we call the course map, which you can see basically it's a complete outline with an indication of all of the activities in the course. It's a course that has not only just 3 modules, but it also has a rigor to it to give you actual outcomes that you could benefit from as a participant in the course. You can see there's a one-time enrollment fee. We also are promoting this idea of continuous engagement in the course over time, so that people who have taken the course continue to participate in some of the web meetings and listen to some of the stakeholder engagement plans that are developed, and again, set up some of those networking opportunities that may not be available anywhere else except in this community of learners. You'll see that we have a schedule of courses, of web meetings and sessions that are coming up. Each session is 1 month, the 4 weeks to get through the material, but it's clear that some people may need more than that. So I think we give people, I think it's 90 days, is that right, Mike, to go through the entire course. So you may actually overlap in 1 4-week session with another 4-week session. And you can see the topics that are discussed each week. They're meeting once a week, but the learning is not just happening in the web meetings. The web meetings are designed to share what you are learning, such as those articles that we discussed, or the identification of a value of a space sector, or a space sector engagement plan. So those are all activities that are shared in the live meetings that help advance the discussion and the participation of everyone in the course. And so, Mike and Ken, I'd love to just get some final words from you about the value of putting together a learning community like this. And Mike, do you want to start?
Sure. We really feel strongly, and Ken sort of alluded to this or was saying it a few minutes ago, that it's very important that we get the workforce, the NewSpace workforce, all moving in the same direction to build a powerful ecosystem. And in that, we look forward to courses like this and opportunities like this and networking like this to help push our movement into the space faster and with a lot more rigor. So that's the intent, and that's the goal, or the objectives and goal of this course, and hopefully other courses like it.
Great, Ken.
Yeah, I think this course allows business owners, business folks to get a great fundamental understanding of the NewSpace ecosystem. It is bigger. It is a little more complex than most folks understand. When Mike and I first started getting into this, I think we started with 4 sectors, and then quickly moved to 10. And when we started really realizing how large this ecosystem is, it was kind of daunting. But we spent a lot of time and a lot of reading and a lot of discussion to understand what the ecosystem is. So for those business owners that are in the industry or wanting to get into the industry, this course really can give them a great fundamental on how to do just that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ken and Mike. We're really happy that you were sharing this with us. My eyes have been open to the opportunity and also the learning opportunity that we have in this class. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next session. The next session, Mike, do you have the date of when the next session begins? Is it in?
Well, yes. And just to clarify too, because the schedule was showing our movement on out in the year, our plan is to have the first of the 4 webinars that are associated with this course. You can start the course anytime. It's an online course, but the 4 webinars that support this course are scheduled for basically the 4 weeks in February. So Ken and I will be available on those 4 Wednesdays. We have the topics, as you saw in the example there, specific things we talk about. And like Ken likes to liken it to, it's more of an office call where we are talking with students. We are presenting some material that we think will facilitate and enhance the work they're doing and clarify where they may be in the course process. So we have our 4 sessions for February. And then as you saw in the previous slide, we'll rotate this same 4 courses up again periodically through the year for students. So you can start and take it in February. And if you get confused and you're still on the course, feel free to come back in May and go through the same discussion time again. Ken and I just want you to be clear and have the takeaways we want you to get out of this thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope that you join us in NewSpace. This is a course that I think will be enjoyable. I'm looking forward, frankly, to being a part of the course. It really helps bring into reality some things that we've been thinking about for a long time and perhaps just dreaming about. And now it's time to put the pencil to the metal and really put some planning into place and talk about how these new space sectors can serve not only for business, but also for humanity. So thank you all for joining us today. We're looking forward to your participation in the course. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.